Hey you guys, it's Irene Lyon here, and today I want to talk to you about self-love. Self-love. Something that I'm going to assume you've heard about, maybe you practice, maybe you find it difficult to dose out self-love to yourself. And I want to address this. I've got some resources here. This is a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel Kolk. Brain, mind, and the body in the healing of trauma. So I'm going to link the idea of trauma with self-love. In a second, I'm going to tell you why trauma to me isn't big events. It can be, but it's something a lot more insidious, and often we don't realize in the Western world where we've not had bombs go off and massive disasters, we don't realize that we actually do have traumatic experience stuck inside of us. But I want to read a passage from his book. This is page 279. So he says, "Coping takes its toll. For many children, it is safer to hate themselves than to risk their relationship with their caregivers by expressing anger or by running away. As a result, abused children are likely to grow up believing that they are fundamentally unlovable. That was the only way their young minds could explain why they were treated so badly. They survived by denying, ignoring, and splitting off large chunks of reality, semicolon. They forget the abuse. They suppress their rage or despair. They numb their physical sensations. If you were abused as a child, you're likely to have a childlike part living inside you that is frozen in time, still holding fast to this kind of self-loathing and denial. Many adults who survive terrible experiences are caught in the same trap. Pushing away intense feelings can be highly adaptive in the short run. It may help you preserve your dignity and independence. It may help you maintain focus on critical tasks like saving a comrade, taking care of your kids, or rebuilding your house." What he writes there is so critical for us to understand when it comes to self-worth, self-love, self-esteem, our capacity to be in this world and not be in a constant state of threat, shutdown, anxiety, depression, chronic illness, etc. And what he writes about these children internalizing, shutting down, realizing that they feel not lovable because in fact they actually weren't loved. Now there's a few parents that might be getting up in arms with what I'm saying here, but hear me out for a second. Even if a parent inherently knows that they don't want to harm or mistreat their child, if that parent is living in their own survival physiology, it will be hard for them not to hurt and not to damage their child. And I think this is a very important conversation that we have to start having, because I mentioned a second ago before I read that we think of trauma and abuse as big things like horrific physical and sexual abuse and neglect where there's no food, no shelter, that kind of thing. But what I've been seeing in a lot of my clients, and I live in a Western world, first class, as you may as well, people are like, oh, but I had a good childhood. I had everything provided to me. We had lots of money, or we didn't have a lot of money, but everything was there. I went to school. I wasn't beaten with a stick. And then they wonder why they're having trouble with things in life, whether it's chronic illness, moving ahead in the world, being able to find a partner. And our traumatic events need not be big and gory. They can be a parent who is feeling stressed, who has a mental illness, who is not in alignment with her or his partner. Emotional disconnection. One of my teachers, Kain, I've mentioned her in a few videos. The last one I actually just did on adrenal fatigue and adrenal health. She said when parents don't like each other or when parents have conflict, the children will go bananas, they'll go berserk because they can feel that energy inside. So if I go back to the topic of self-love, and I was just doing some minor research on YouTube and watching some other people's videos on how to improve self-love. And while I love the fact that people are putting themselves out there and offering advice, the advice is just skimming over the surface. Things like making yourself a cup of tea and sitting with that tea, taking warm baths, nurturing yourself, getting your hair done, getting a pedicure, a massage, self-massage, essential oils, eating food and turning off all devices, giving yourself unconditional love. So here's the thing with that. First of all, there's nothing wrong with getting a pedicure and having a hot bath and eating food and journaling and all these things that I have seen people suggest for improving self-love. Nothing wrong with that. However, if you are someone that struggles with self-love and self-worth, I'm going to bet that you've tried those things and you're still struggling with things. That's one bet that I'm going to make. The thing too, to say to someone, just love yourself unconditionally because that's how the universe wants you to be loved. If we didn't have that in unconditional love, and I mean total unconditional love, even when you screwed up and destroyed the kitchen because you left the tap on, or you set something on fire, or you hurt one of your siblings, or you did something that wasn't right. If you were shamed in any way for doing that and you were told that you were bad versus you've done something bad, right? This kind of referenced some of Brene Brown's work on shame. If you were shamed in a toxic way and you weren't loved in the face of your mistake, the accident, that tells you that the world isn't unconditional, that there is a condition to love. And then in order to be loved, you have to be either perfect, or you have to get good grades, or you can't mess up, or you can't express your anger or your rage or your sadness. So just as I had mentioned in that quote from Bessel, he talks about these children that self-internalize and end up with self-hatred because outside of them, there are these cues and these people and these caregivers that are not demonstrating what actual self-unconditional love is. One of the first things I want to talk about is this: what is unconditional love? If we didn't have it when we were young, we are going to try to do the behaviors that might mimic it, but we essentially have to do some really deep inner work. We have to get back to those sensations that he talked about that we shut down, back to the emotions that weren't allowed to be expressed, typically things like anger and sadness. Out of all the clients I've worked with, I would say that 99.9% of them were never allowed to show their anger, their aggression. It was wrong. And then for some, when they would cry, they would be sent to the room. And again, I don't want to point blame to the parents, but those parents, those adults, probably they themselves were never taught when they were young how to express anger and sadness and all these things in a way that was safe and unconditional. So something I just want to leave you with today is this idea of what really is self-love. And if it wasn't something that you were taught, it wasn't something that was ingrained in your, not just your psyche, but in your body, in your cells, in your sensations, I recommend that you find ways to work at gaining it back that are very internal, that are body-based, that help you come to terms maybe with the adversity and the trauma and the stress that you might have gone through when you were young. Even if you didn't have a horrific childhood, even if there were just little bits where you felt like you were shamed a bit too much, where you had to perform and be perfect, that is a damaging trait to put into a little person, to always make sure that they have to be perfect and prim and proper. So if that is something that resonates with you, if you feel that you might fit into that category, I would love for you to check out the resources I have on my website, where I talk to you about what happens in the physiology, in your stress physiology, and how our system goes into fight, flight, or into shutdown, where we no longer feel anything and we numb out our emotions and sensations. Because in order to bring that self-love back, we have to get into the physiology of the body. We can't just strategize in our mind and do these external things. Nothing wrong with them. Remember, like the tea and the bath and the self-massage, all really good. but we need another step. We're missing this step of being able to work at the level of our nervous system physiology. All right, so I'm gonna leave it at that. If you are new to my vlog, to watching these videos on YouTube, or if this is on other social media feeds, be sure to go over to my website, go to my YouTube channel, sign up for my email updates, subscribe to my channel. My thing is nervous system health. And I've been researching and seeing in my participants and the people I talk to on social that this is a massive missing link in our community, in our culture. That book that I just quoted at the very beginning by Bessel Kolk, he talks about the nervous system at length in that book, as do many of his other colleagues. So what I might do is underneath this in the show more section of the YouTube, I'll post a few resources in addition to him. But that's it for now. Think about this idea of self-love. If you resonate with this, send me a comment, give me a thumbs up, let me know that this makes sense. And maybe you are that person that's been trying these external things and you're just not getting to the root. If that's the case, then definitely check out this nervous system piece. I do believe it is the missing piece in a lot of our health problems, mental health problems, and just how we show up in the world and how we love ourselves. All right, take very good care, and we will see you next time.